What if I told you there's a game where you can go from tickling goblins to slapping gods, and you can do it with up to 7 of your friends in the most chaotic co-op madness imaginable? Lorm is a roguelite that doesn't take itself seriously for even a second, and that's exactly why it works. This is pure, unfiltered gaming chaos with a sense of humor that had me laughing out loud. Stay with me through this first look, because by the end, you're going to understand why this might be the most fun you'll have screaming at your friends this year. Let me start by saying that Lort knows exactly what it is, and it leans into that identity with absolute confidence. This is a 1 to 8 player co-op action roguelite set in a cursed fantasy world, and from the moment you start playing, it's clear the developers wanted to create something that prioritizes fun and absurdity over everything else. The game's description literally says you evolve from goblin tickler to god slapper, and honestly, that's the perfect summary of the power fantasy arc you experience. The core concept is straightforward. You and up to 7 friends are fighting your way through this cursed world, battling enemies, collecting loot, and stacking power-ups in pursuit of escape. But the execution is anything but straightforward. This is organized chaos, the kind of game where you start out struggling against basic enemies, and by the end of a good run, you're an unstoppable force of destruction that makes bosses look like minor inconveniences. And getting there is an absolute blast. What immediately stands out is the co-op focus. Yes, you can play solo, and the game is perfectly functional that way, but Lort is clearly designed with multiplayer in mind. The chaos scales beautifully with player count. Playing with 1 or 2 friends is manageable, almost tactical. Add 4 more players, and suddenly the screen is an explosion of abilities, enemies, projectiles, and pure pandemonium. It's the kind of chaos that has everyone yelling over voice chat, laughing when someone goes down, frantically trying to revive fallen teammates while enemies swarm from every direction. The revive system is simple, but perfect for this kind of game. When a teammate goes down, you can bring them back by getting close and interacting. But here's the thing. You're vulnerable while reviving. So suddenly, you've got these moments where someone yells for help, another player has to make the risky play to save them, and everyone else is providing cover fire. There's even this item called the tutor that you can blow to rally your friends. And yes, it's exactly as ridiculous as it sounds. These little mechanics create emergent moments of teamwork and heroism that make the co-op feel meaningful rather than just having more bodies in the fight. The combat system is accessible, but has depth if you want to engage with it. You've got multiple weapon types available: swords for melee, wands for magic, bows for ranged precision, and guns, because apparently this fantasy world said, why not? What I love is that you can freely swap between weapons during combat. You're not locked into a class or build. If you find a better weapon, you can switch on the fly. This flexibility means you can adapt to different situations and enemy types without feeling committed to a choice you made at the start of a run. The weapon variety creates interesting dynamics in co-op. Maybe one player focuses on tanky melee combat, getting in close and drawing aggro. Another player hangs back with a bow, picking off dangerous targets. Someone else is slinging spells with a wand, providing crowd control. And then there's always that one friend who found a really good gun and is just blasting everything. The game doesn't force you into rigid roles, but these roles emerge naturally from weapon choices and playstyles, and they all complement each other in satisfying ways. But the real heart of Lort's gameplay is the power-up system. And this is where things get delightfully ridiculous. You're constantly finding power-ups with names like Na's Barrier, Boomer's Blessing, Trophy of Swole, and Cool Comfy Shorts. The naming alone tells you this game isn't taking itself seriously. There are over 100 different power-ups, and they stack. Not replace each other, stack. So, as a run progresses, you're accumulating these absurd combinations of effects that turn you from a regular adventurer into an absolute monster. The power stacking is where the game achieves its core power fantasy. Early in a run, you're being careful, dodging attacks, managing resources. An hour into a good run with a dozen power-ups active, you're moving at twice normal speed, leaving trails of fire, firing projectiles in every direction, with shields and barriers and passive effects that make you practically invincible. Enemies that were threatening at the start of the run now die if you so much as look at them aggressively. And the game keeps the challenge balanced by throwing more and crazier enemies at you to match your growing power. What makes the power-up system even better is how it interacts with multiplayer. Different players will find different power-ups, so everyone's building their character differently throughout the run. You get these moments where someone discovers a broken combination and suddenly they're carrying the team, or everyone's power level spikes at the same time and you're all just laughing at how overpowered you've become. The game encourages sharing information about what you've found, coordinating who should grab certain items, and generally working together to create the most broken team composition possible. The bosses are described as massive, weird, and ready to ruin your run, and that's incredibly accurate. These aren't your standard fantasy boss fights. The designs are creative and often bizarre, with attack patterns that range from brutally difficult to just plain strange. What I appreciate is that the bosses feel like proper skill checks. You can't just brute force them, even with a bunch of power-ups. You need to learn their patterns, figure out their weaknesses, and execute properly. They hit hard and play dirty, which makes finally taking one down feel genuinely rewarding. Boss fights in co-op are where the game shines brightest. With multiple players, you can actually strategize, have different people handling different mechanics, covering each other when someone needs to heal or reposition. The difficulty scales with player count, so bosses don't become trivial just because you brought friends. They're still a legitimate threat that requires coordination and communication. And when you do win, everyone contributed. Everyone shares in that victory, and it creates these memorable moments that you'll be talking about afterward. The roguelite structure means each run is different. You're making choices about which paths to take, which quests to pursue, which ingredients to pick up. The game calls this cooking up chaos, and it's a fitting metaphor. Your choices determine which enemies spawn, which locations you visit, which bosses you face. There's agency in how you build each run, and experimenting with different approaches keeps the game fresh across multiple playthroughs. The quest system adds another layer of choice and replayability. You're not just progressing through a linear path, you're selecting objectives that appeal to your playstyle or offer rewards you want. Maybe one quest offers better loot but faces you against harder enemies. Another might be safer but less rewarding. These decisions matter, and different groups will make different choices based on their confidence level and what they're trying to achieve. Graphically, Lort has this colorful, stylized aesthetic that matches its tone perfectly. It's not hyper-realistic or trying to be the most beautiful game ever made. Instead, it's vibrant and readable, which is crucial when you've got 8 players and dozens of enemies on screen simultaneously. The art style is distinct enough that you can tell what's happening even during the most chaotic moments. Character designs are fun, enemy designs are creative and often weird in entertaining ways, and the environments have personality without being overly detailed. The visual feedback during combat is excellent. You always know when you're hitting enemies, when you're taking damage, when abilities are activating. With so much happening on screen, clarity is essential, and the game achieves that. Power-ups have visual effects that stack noticeably, so you can actually see yourself becoming more powerful as your character gains trailing effects, auras, and other indicators of all the buffs you've accumulated. The humor in Lort is consistent throughout. The item names are jokes, the descriptions are tongue-in-cheek, even the lore snippets you find are written with this irreverent tone that never takes the fantasy setting too seriously. It's not trying to be a comedy game necessarily, but there's a lightness to everything that makes the experience fun rather than stressful. Even when you're failing a run, it's hard to be too upset because the game never pretended to be serious in the first place. The difficulty curve feels well-tuned for both solo and co-op play. Early areas teach you the basics without being trivial. Mid-game ramps up the challenge as you're gaining power-ups to compensate. Late game becomes this test of how well you've built your character and how skilled you've become at the combat. The game can absolutely kick your ass if you're not paying attention, but it never feels unfair. Deaths are learning opportunities, and each run teaches you something that makes the next one better. The progression between runs is important too. While each run starts fresh in true roguelite fashion, you're gaining knowledge and hopefully unlocking new items or options for future runs. The meta progression isn't so aggressive that it invalidates skill, but it's present enough that you feel like you're working towards something even when individual runs fail. It's that classic one more run addiction that the best roguelites achieve. Performance with 8 players is surprisingly solid. I was expecting significant slowdown or technical issues when you've got that many players, plus enemies, plus effects all happening at once, but the game handles it well. There's occasional frame rate dips during the absolute peak chaos moments, but nothing that ruins the experience. The netcode seems stable for online co-op, which is crucial for a game this dependent on precise timing and coordination. The audio design deserves mention because it contributes significantly to the chaotic atmosphere. Combat sounds are punchy and satisfying. Each weapon type has distinct audio that helps you understand what's happening around you. The music is energetic and keeps pace with the action without being overwhelming. Voice lines and sound effects for power-ups and abilities are clear enough that you can identify what's happening even when you can't visually track everything. And yes, the tutor sounds exactly as absurd as you're imagining. What I really appreciate about Lort is how it handles difficulty accessibility. The game is challenging, but it's not trying to be a brutal punish fest. It wants you to feel powerful and have fun with friends. The difficulty comes from managing chaos and making smart decisions, not from unfair mechanics or cheap deaths. This makes it approachable for a wider range of players. You don't need to be a hardcore roguelite veteran to enjoy Lort. You just need to embrace the chaos and be willing to laugh when things go wrong. The itemization with over 100 power-ups means there's always something new to discover. Even after multiple runs, you're still finding combinations you haven't tried before, interactions between items you didn't know existed, strategies that completely change how you approach the game. That kind of discovery and experimentation is what gives roguelites their longevity, and Lort has it in abundance. The game also benefits from having a clear sense of escalation. You genuinely feel your progression from weak to absurdly overpowered over the course of a run. There's this beautiful moment in every successful run where you realize you're no longer afraid of regular enemies. You're actively seeking out fights because you know you're strong enough to handle them, and you want the loot and experience they provide. That transformation from scared survivor to confident god-slapper is the core appeal, and Lort delivers it consistently. Playing solo versus playing in a full 8-player lobby are dramatically different experiences, and both are valid. Solo is more measured, more about personal skill and careful decision-making. You can take your time, think about your choices, and play at your own pace. 8-player is pure madness, a social experience as much as a gaming one, where half the fun is just experiencing the chaos together and laughing at the absurdity. The game accommodates both ends of that spectrum effectively. The replayability factor is high because of the randomization and the variety of builds you can create. No two runs play out exactly the same. Different power-up combinations create different playstyles. Different weapon preferences change how you approach combat. Different group compositions in multiplayer lead to different strategies. And the quest choices add another layer of variability that keeps things fresh. This isn't a game where you see everything in 5 hours and move on. There's genuine depth here for players who want to keep diving in. Lort is exactly what it promises to be. Chaotic co-op fun with friends, absurd power scaling, and a sense of humor that never quits. It's not trying to reinvent roguelites or be the deepest game ever made. It's trying to give you and your friends a ridiculously good time, and it absolutely succeeds at that goal. If you've got a group of friends looking for something to play together, or if you just want a roguelite that doesn't take itself too seriously, Lort is worth checking out. Let me know in the comments what your most ridiculous co-op gaming moment has been, and whether Lort's brand of chaos appeals to you. Thanks for watching this first look, and I'll catch you in the next one.